Hello, welcome to Bookspin. I thought I'd do a book tag video. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I was tagged recently by Duncan on his channel, Back Away from the Donkey. And the name of the tag is Return of the Jedi 40th Anniversary Tag. And this is a tag that Duncan created. So it's 40 years since the release of the movie Return of the Jedi, which was a very satisfying conclusion to a classic series, of course. I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan in the world, but I did really enjoy the original trilogy. So we've got here 5 questions which ask for book suggestions based on themes from this movie. I won't really talk about Star Wars much itself, but let's get into it. So the first question says, twins. Suggest a book that has twins in it. So I had a little think about this, and the book I want to recommend is Anansi Boys by Neil Gaiman, which is a humorous fantasy novel. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of it to hand anymore. But from what I remember, this is a story about a young man called Charlie Nancy. He's the main character. Near the start of the book, his father dies, and this turns his life around. He discovers that his father is actually a god, or an incarnation of a god from West African folklore. A trickster god, to be specific, Anansi. And moreover, he discovers that he has a twin brother that he didn't know about. So he finds his twin brother, whose name is Spider, and Spider has all these kind of divine, mysterious abilities, which he seems to have inherited from their father. So although they're not identical twins, Spider has the ability, for example, to disguise himself and appear to others as his brother Charlie. It's been a long time since I read this, but I do remember it being very funny, quite exciting. And I've also heard that, I heard recently that Amazon are working on a TV series adaptation, so I'm going to look out for that. So that's Anansi Boys by Neil Gaiman. Question 2. Darth Vader, Redemption Arc. A book that has a redemption arc as part of the narrative. So for this one, I'd like to talk about The Arabian Nights, which of course is a classic collection of folk tales, and these are all combined under a single frame narrative. And it's the frame story that I want to talk about. In the frame story, we have Scheherazade, who is the narrator of all these stories, and we have her husband, the king, King Shahryar, who's actually a very evil man. So what happens is, at the start of the story, his wife, a previous wife of his, she betrays him, and this drives him crazy. He ends up killing her, and what he does is, for the next 3 years, he takes a new wife every night and has her killed the next day, because basically he believes he can't trust any woman. And this carries on until he meets Scheherazade, who ends up becoming his new wife. And she manages to charm him by telling him a new story every night for 1001 nights. And each story is very enticing and enchanting. And he doesn't want to kill her. He wants to find out what the next story will be. And he gradually realizes that he's actually fallen in love with Scheherazade, and he's become a changed man. So she manages to convert him from an evil tyrant into a loving husband. So that's why you could say it counts as a redemption arc. Next one, number 3, Death Star. Retelling or reimagining of a story. So for this one, I've gone for another Neil Gaiman book, The Graveyard Book, which is a kind of YA or children's fantasy, and it's pretty dark in tone, actually. I think anyone of any age can enjoy this. The story's about a boy who gets raised by ghosts in a graveyard, and it's a kind of retelling of the Jungle Book, and it's very spooky and atmospheric. So there are arguably elements of horror in this book, in as much as any children's book could be classified as horror, but I definitely enjoyed it and I do recommend it. The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Question 4. Ewoks, a book that has a furry companion or character in it. There are a couple of books that came to my mind when I read this question. So the first book is Little Fuzzy by H. Beam Piper. I picked this book up just recently. It's a classic science fiction novel. And as you can see, there is a very cute furry creature on the cover. I haven't read this yet, but my understanding is that this is a first contact story about the discovery of a small furry intelligent species on another planet. And I'm looking forward to reading this. And the other book that I thought of is The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers, which is the 4th book in the Wayfarers series. And there's a few characters in this book. They're all alien species. But the species which came to mind is the Laru. So there are 2 characters in this book, and their names are Olu and her child Tupo, who are members of the Laru. And the Laru are an intelligent alien race, and they're described as 4-limbed furry mammals with long necks. And they're also kind of like marsupials, as they carry their young in pouches on a parent's chest. So, The Galaxy and the Ground Within. Question 5. Finale, a 3rd book in a trilogy that is satisfying. So again, I've chosen 2 books for this question, and both of these books are really epic in scale and in ideas. And the first one is Death's End by Liu Cixin, and this is the 3rd book in the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, or the 3-Body Problem trilogy. And this is an absolutely mind-blowing finale to an epic science fiction series. And this series really is a milestone in Chinese science fiction. It's essentially a first contact story on a really massive scale, and it takes place over a very long period. And these books are really jam-packed with fascinating and awe-inspiring hard SF ideas that come to a climax in Death's End. With each book, the ideas just keep getting more and more awe-inspiring. It's been a few years since I've read this series. I plan to reread this series later this year as part of a read-along. I can't wait to get back into it. And the other book I have here is Absolution Gap by Alastair Reynolds, and this is the 3rd book in the Revelation Space trilogy, which came out in between 2000 and 2003. That said, Alastair Reynolds more recently added another book to the series, Inhibitor Phase, which I have here. This one came out in 2021. And there you go, an excuse to show off my signed copy. But yeah, so you could say that the series is actually now a quartet or a tetralogy, but it was originally published as a trilogy, so I think this still counts. Anyway, Absolution Gap is my favourite in the original trilogy. It's an epic space opera with Again, really interesting concepts, atmospheric storytelling and world building. There's so much going on in these novels. It would be impossible for me to summarize here. But I can tell you this is all of my all-time favorite sequels in a series. So, Absolution Gap by Alistair Reynolds. Great read. Those are the 5 questions. We also have an additional prompt to tag anyone. So I'm going to tag Fred from Read by Fred, Gareth from Books, Songs and Other Magic, Hannah from Savage Reads, and Chaz from Bookish Chaz. So it's up to you if you'd like to follow up on this tag, or if anyone else wants to do this tag, feel free to do so. And that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.